Okay, and we're live. Awesome. Everybody got their notebooks ready. We're going to pick up where we left off with a lot of stuff in After Effects. And everybody either went in and said in person or recorded their video questions. So let's meet some of our online students.
Hello. My question for this week is there a way to like choose?
This is Noelle.
To this, so like it could be like something else instead of like these bubbles. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll dial down, right? There's some confusion with some students about the effect scene, right? And that one was, you make your own thing, right? I made something that was different than Mark. Mark was just kind of messing around with some of the effects. Yeah, as much as I try to come up with a way to show you how to do things, messing around with stuff is a time-tested way to learn stuff. So sometimes, as we go on throughout the semester, I'll ask you to, there'll be less guidance from me and more room for you to do stuff. And so he's using some turbulent noise, I think, in that one. In turbulent noise, there's a bunch of things. So a few things here. As you went through that one, there's different types of layers in After Effects, right? Name one. Shape layer, right? For just basic shapes. Anybody got another one? What if you want some words to appear?
Text layer?
Yeah, sure. That's a separate thing. And the other one, if you just want to fill up the screen with like I need a block of pixels to start, that's a solid, right? So a solid layer. So for instance, in this case, if I come in here with a new solid, we'll just call this noise. Because some effects, first of all, you can't just apply an effect to no layers. You need something there for put the effects on. And one that we'll drill down on a bunch is noise. So fractal noise here. Noise is a random pattern in computer graphics. Up here we have fractal type and noise type. You can get a lot of different looks here, different types of random patterns that have slightly different sort of looks for them. Some of them could be used for cloud, some of them could be used for other stuff. You just sort of, and then within that, there's sort of how that noise is drawn out. And so you can get different kinds of looks there with fractal noise, in addition to doing a bunch of other stuff. This is one that we'll come back to again and again. Cool, so that was Noelle. That was her question. Let's keep going. Carla?
Hello everyone. I guess my question is if you have the latest Mac, if you're able to use that for this class, or am I still going to need to check out one of the options?
Yep, so like I said in the other class, Carla, if that's working so far, then you're going to be okay. Does anyone else have a Mac here? Yeah, okay. Do you have a Pro?
Yeah.
MacBook Pro? Okay, so that has a card in it. I think you'll be fine. Yeah, I haven't used any of the new ones with the new cards in it, but should be good.
Hi everyone. I didn't have a specific question for you.
Wait, I'm in the wrong folder. That's why. These people are in this class. Hold on. There we go. James. Ashley James. Ashley, how are you?
My question this week came up the first week of learning lessons around rotation and orientation. And in the lesson, Mark was telling us to the rotation tool selected, and holding shift to grab the green arrow, the Y, and to and I do that 3D move on the orientation there, and I wasn't able to do that. I'm holding shift or not holding shift. Either way, I can really only make it go up and down if I'm grabbing up here. If I grab it down here, I can achieve the desired effect, but I just wasn't sure if I was maybe doing something.
It's not you, it's Adobe. That's usually the problem. So they changed the 3D interface a little bit, right? So if I come in and make this layer 3D, and it's better now, this gizmo, I think, is easier to use, right? And so first of all, I made the layer 3D with this guy here. Everybody knows this now from the homework, right? Make a layer 3D. Once you make a 3D, you get this gizmo to move, and then you just grab the circle in that dimension to rotate it on that dimension, right? So there's not you don't have to use that separate tool up here. You can use all of these. This is just much better than what it was before. So it should be easier to place things in 3D. So yeah, actually it's just slightly, they just did that in like the most recent version of After Effects, I think. See ya.
Alright, my question this week is, in other Adobe applications, you're able to save...
Okay, so Richard, first thing is in OBS, for you guys who will ask questions later, we're only seeing a quarter of your screen in here. And the reason is you want to come over to the screen, right click. I'm not sure it's going to, oh yeah, it will let me do this. Transform fit to screen, right? Because you probably got a 4K monitor and you're exporting this at HD. And so that's why you only see 1/4 of the screen, right? How big is HD in pixels? We talked about that number on Monday or Wednesday, I think.
1080.
1080 this way? How many this way?
1080 vertically.
Yeah, 1080 up and down. How many this way?
920 or 1920.
1920, right. And 4K is 4 of those. Boop, 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 right? So it's over 4, it's like, what is it, 388 something, 38, 24? Yeah, something like that.
2160, I think.
Right, 2160. So that's what's going on there, so that we can see your screen a little bit better.
If presets essentially on effects so that you can drag and drop them later. So for example, could we save the overshoot that we animated today as a preset that we can quickly drag and drop on other animations in future compositions?
Yep, we'll do that. I think next project we'll make a few presets that we can use over again, as far as them being presets and stuff that we can bring into. You could use directly in Premiere if you wanted to. We'll get to that. Trevor.
All right. Hello, everyone. Sorry about the no camera. I have a desktop and this display doesn't have a camera, so I'll have to go buy an attachment for next time. I'm not sure how
You can just sort of draw a picture of yourself down here.
So I'm sure I'll get feedback on that. Yeah, this first week didn't have much. I mean, there's like the new assignment, which I'm glad it's in After Effects because at least now I use that a little bit. I do have a question about the Maxon stuff because I clicked install on a few of these, but like it says buy, and I went through all the payment, like the tutorials and how to do it. And I'm pretty sure I did it correctly, so I don't know if why they say buy or if I can just install them. I don't really want.
Okay, so Trevor, we're also only seeing a quarter of your screen, so you got to do that thing I just told Richard to do, because we're only seeing, I can't tell what it's, if it says buy over there instead of install, I don't think you've signed into Maxon. So you need to open this app and then actually sign in with your My Maxon account.
Do that if it buys anything. I think
It's not going to spend your money by, it's not going to do that.
I had to put in information for that anyways. Yeah, I just want clarification on that if I can. And on the scheduling, because it didn't really specify this in this area, and it didn't specify it in like the when I was selecting the classes. It just says like to be announced. So the classes, like there's the in-person on the Monday and Wednesday, and I was wondering if each of those if those would be the same class or if those would be two separate classes, like
2 separate classes.
i.e. You would go to just one of those two.
You get credit for showing up if you show up to one, but if you show up to one and aren't in person for the other, watch the live stream. Is that clear to everybody? Right, last week we only had one class because there was no Monday class.
Two classes, or if going to both of them, like you'd be missing information.
Yes, you would miss information.
And what time would these live streams happen? Like, would they be the same time as these?
Yes, the live stream is the class. This is all on the syllabus.
As the like in-person classes, would you just be streaming from the class?
Yes.
And I know you said it in the lecture, but
I did.
could we get like the times in here somewhere, or maybe I just missed where it was?
Syllabus.
But yeah, because I forget the times. If it's just spoken in one of the lectures, I'm definitely gonna forget that.
Look at the
I think that's all
syllabus.
the questions I have about stuff. I'm sure I'll come up with more.
Okay, so that's a good start. Check out the syllabus.
Hi, I'm Arturo Valderrama. I'm a film and TV production major.
Hi, Arturo.
And this week's work went fine for me. I had no issues
Great.
with downloading the applications and getting all the necessary requirements for this class. The only trouble I did end up running into was pretty much the getting the discount for Moxon. That was a hurdle I had to get through, but I managed to figure it out. And
How are you guys doing?
yeah,
You got your home
everything was
computers
fine.
up and running? Everything is
The
installed?
only thing
I have a problem with one.
that
You have a problem with which one?
So for like the Adobe Media Encoder,
Uh-huh.
I had a problem with the universe. It kept like saying that, oh, you need to reinstall.
Yeah, you can just uninstall Universe for now. So,
I know
Ju-
if it's required to have it, so I just uninstalled.
yeah, I mean, I told everyone to grab all of those, but there's some, they updated it like in November, and that hosed whatever it's doing to Adobe and throws up that error. We're going to use the VFX thing more than the Universe thing, so you can just uninstall that for now. And there's a whole ticket and thing on their website about how no one can use it. So obviously, like, we don't, the VFX suite is the much more important one, and fortunately there's no problems with that.
I ended up having,
So everybody hear that
Which
here.
I think, which I hope is more.
If you're getting an error that says anything about Universe, right, which is Universe without the E at the end, you can just uninstall that one set of stuff.
than enough for all the projects they will be doing in the course. I'm confident that it's powerful enough. It's definitely more powerful than my Mac. And
Ooh.
I'm really looking forward to learning more about visual effects. I can honestly see myself using After Effects, using all these applications that can help me get into the field of filmmaking. Because for the longest time, I've been editing, my father's, boxing events. I've been filming his fighters and editing videos for them. And I've always felt like, I could be doing more. It can't be just as simple as getting the highlights and putting them together. I always felt like, there has to be like some kind of visual effect.
Yes, I agree. That's what we're going to be doing here. We can be doing a lot to improve those kind of like highlight reel-ish kind of things. Awesome, Arturo. Jay.
Alright, so I was following along the best that I could with Mark's tutorial here. My question is, I'm not understanding fully how pre-comps work. I created this one here, but this one I believe was already created in the exercise here, so I don't. Yeah, so my question is, how exactly do pre-comps work?
That's a great question, Jay. We'll address that again today. It is confusing, and you'll get a feel for it more. Pre-comps are like a necessary part of After Effects. It's also like a really opaque part of After Effects. It's hard to tell exactly what's happening there. Celeste.
Hi guys.
Hi, Celeste.
It was really fun working on this mini project this week.
How about you guys? Did you have fun?
Oh yeah, it's fun.
Okay, calm down.
It's nice to use After Effects again. Everything went pretty smoothly.
That kind of insinuates she wasn't using After Effects all of Christmas break, like to make her own video Christmas card. Did you guys make a video Christmas card? No, nobody? Okay.
So I just have one question. This part of the project that I worked on with the effects,
Cool.
I feel like it would look really cool on some stock footage of like an eye, because it kind of looks like an iris to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was wondering how to apply that to an eye and make it look realistic. Thank you.
We're going to get to that. Probably not this week, but we're getting there as far as like combining. We'll shoot some of our own stuff. Maybe not in the next couple of weeks, but we're going to also, we'll use some plates that we shoot and then some stock footage. Like, so I'll probably hand off a couple, like a bunch of these assignments have some stock footage I know works, right? And then I'll have you guys find some other stuff or shoot some own stuff to use, a combination of those two things. But that looks cool, Celeste. Good job.
Hello class. One
Hi,
of the
lady.
questions that I have for this first assignment is I'd like to make this logo bounce from scenes or layers. It is not in the whole composition. I just want it in a few, and I wanted to bounce out of the scene, but I don't remember how to do that. I've been moving or playing with the position. I also moved the what's it called?
So you want to do it with the position, you don't want to animate the anchor point. Usually, I'm almost never animating an anchor point. You want to set the anchor point before you get going. We'll do that some more today, but we'll do some bouncing today in class. We'll bounce. Remind me to bounce something. We'll bounce something.
Hey Casey.
It's Emily.
So I've been working in After Effects and it has been pretty easy, not many issues. It's been really fun. I actually miss working in After Effects. I feel like I haven't really messed with it in a good long while. So this class is a really nice opportunity.
It's like an old friend that never does what you tell them.
For me to get back into that. But I do have a couple of questions like regarding the program itself and like just the industry itself, especially when it comes to like VFX. So I was wondering, so in After Effects, is it possible to do frame by frame animation like you would in like Animate, or would it just be more effective to do it in Animate?
Yes, for the most part, you would be doing that stuff in Animate and bring in the image sequence into After Effects.
Also,
there's like a draw frame by frame in After Effects, but it's really just for marking stuff up.
I was wondering what's the actual like difference between compositing and lighting, because I don't really understand the difference.
I mean, lighting is just either the real world lighting or the 3D actually manipulation of 3D light objects, but compositing is just the word for combining images. Photoshop is compositing. It's just not doing it in time, right? So you just take one thing, put it on top of another thing. That's a composite.
Because I've seen both of the, like some reels for both of them, And exactly.
Sometimes you would composite in light, right? Like if you're doing something where there's like light rays, we could do something like that. You would composite in like a fake light, but it wouldn't be like a 3D lighting thing.
Examples for each one, but I don't really understand the exact difference. Maybe there's a difference when it comes to 2D and 3D is when it really like shows, but when it comes to 2D, I don't really understand the difference. And I feel like I had one more. Oh, yeah, okay, so I'm really interested in 2D VFX, and I like doing frame by frame. So I was just wondering what are things that I should possibly think about adding into a reel if I were like when making one. But yeah, aside from that, I think
You've got that water thing in your reel. That's good. I would make a fire next if you've got that water.
pretty good.
Emily has a reel. She was in class last semester and the semester before.
And I'm really excited for this class.
Awesome.
Alright, well,
Hi, Shane.
first video.
Shane,
and
right?
we only had one assignment, I guess, so I don't quite know what to ask. I'll just show, like, what I think I had a little issue with. For this first assignment, or whatever it was, for this part, how it's going in, and then staying, and then turning. I had a little issue with it not turning at first, and then I realized that I didn't have my keyframe like added. So, I mean, that helped me out a lot, realizing that I was in this sort of position, and the reason it wasn't moving was because I just didn't add this little button right here. But other than that, I feel like it's been pretty smooth so far and easy. So, thank you.
Cool. Nice to meet you, Shane. Molly.
Hi. So, I have actually 2 questions, and so the first one is I actually go back and forth from my laptop and my actual PC. And I was wondering, like, thinking future-wise, if I ever want, like, if I have these compositions that, like, maybe I've done, and I had stuff, and I want to transfer it to my actual PC at home, is there, like, a certain way I should save it, or should I just kind of transfer the project file and all the footage to the computer, or should I save as, like, one of these? I wasn't sure about that one. And then another one is actually, I mentioned that my laptop obviously doesn't have a lot of space. It can use After Effects pretty okay, so that's why I usually use it for After Effects and Premiere Pro. But I use our home PC right now, which has an NVIDIA, but I'm actually creating my own, or making my own PC the next month here. I'm just getting a GPU, and my brother had mentioned that I should get a AMD GPU because it's more affordable for what I'm looking for. And I was making sure if that would be something that I can also process on
Yep, that would be fine. I mean, those are the 2 companies that make GPUs, right? NVIDIA and AMD. In general, all of these computers are NVIDIAs, and I have way more experience using NVIDIAs, and people just seem to have less problems, but they both work, and having a GPU is better than not having a GPU. Awesome, and we're going to talk way more about files tonight, Molly. Awesome. So we met everybody online. How are you guys doing on the live stream? Good? Cool. All right. You guys, questions from the homework. Cool? No problems at all? Easy peasy?
I do have just one question.
Okay.
It's probably a silly question, but how exactly do you render? Because when I picked the export option, there was like 4 different options, and there was like the media encoder one, there's a import it to Premiere Pro option. Which one's the best one, or which one should I go with?
Right. So what I did and what I recommend you guys is send it to media encoder, right? So let me just add a keyframe here so that this does something. There we go. Okay, so I've got a comp here, and now I want to export it. Right, so I'm saving this, and then composition, add to media encoder queue. So I already have media encoder fired up.
What's the difference between picking it from the File tab versus the Composition tab?
Hold on. Microsoft Edge has interrupted our class. No, I don't want any of this. Jeez. Okay, there we go. Right, so I went up here, add to media encoder queue. What do you mean? Over?
In the File tab, yeah, at the top left, there's also the export, and there's like the same option. Is there like a difference between that, or?
No, I think these both added to media encoder queue, right? As long as you're not using one of these other ones, this one, media encoder queue, right? So this renders and compresses it at the same time, right? So this is the thing I would write down right now, is that in a lot of the older, I don't have time every semester to remake every tutorial, right? So the ones that need it the most get my attention, and we kind of work with it. So in a lot of the other ones, I'll say use the Vimeo 1080 settings, right? Because we used to post all of our work by the end of the semester on Vimeo. We're going to stop doing that because it's just not working anymore. And we're going to use YouTube, and so you can use the YouTube 1080 settings. Right? The nice thing about media encoder is that it does two things, right? It's going to render it out, right? So when you're working in After Effects, it's not a movie yet. It's just a bunch of stuff layered together at that point, right? And so it's doing the rendering part of it, and then it is compressing it into, we're going to be using MP4. So this will be this should be a small movie, right? So for most of the stuff we do here at the beginning, we're going to be making stuff that's like 15 seconds or 10 seconds or 30 seconds. We're not going to, really short stuff. So you shouldn't have huge file sizes. If you end up with a file that's like 900 megabytes or like 2 gigs or something, you probably did something wrong. That's not compressed, okay? So I have this here, and I can find all of the settings in this window. Adobe updates all of this stuff, so it has whatever the settings are that YouTube wants and Facebook wants, or I think there's Instagram settings in here. And you can do it multiple sources at the same time, right? So YouTube 1080, that's the one we want to use. I'll drag that over. I'll get rid of this one. And say, yeah, my client wants to put it on YouTube, and they want to put it on Facebook. And so here's the Facebook 1080. And so I can drag both of those over and hit play and make both of them at the same time, right? And so that'll give me the YouTube version and the Facebook version, and they'll be the right size and compression for both of those platforms. So you can see why this is advantageous, right? Your client, you're working for your client, they want to put it on all of their social media. Is there TikTok on here? TikTok spelled weird, right? Said Casey, seeming very old. Is it TIK or TICK?
TIK.
Okay, so they don't have TikTok on here. Even Adobe's not that cool, I guess. Anyways, you get the idea. TikTok's, no one does TikTok this way, right? It's all this way, right? It's up and down, not this way. So, I mean, that wouldn't work in this case. But in this case, we're doing two different versions of landscape, not portrait. So that's why we use media encoder in this instance. Does this make sense for everybody? Okay, this is great. The problem is it doesn't always work. Yeah, not only have I not been able to drill down on it, like neither has anyone else. So, I read a bunch of threads about this every semester when it happens to people, and I can't really figure out what the thing is. So, how does it not work? It doesn't work because you'll come over here and you'll say, add to media encoder queue, And if you don't have Media Encoder open, it'll take a second because it's got to fire up Media Encoder and then send the thing over. And that could take, sometimes it seems to take a really long time. But if Media Encoder is already open, it should be fairly quick. However, sometimes you get a message saying, I can't do it. You know, there's some sort of error sending the information to Media Encoder. Okay? And so I have a video that walks through this by itself, and I'll post that on the Slack channel because Cassandra in our class is already having this problem. So how do you get around this? In this case, you know, option A is send a Media Encoder. If that's working, you know, fine, great. Option B, you know, plan B here, is you can go to composition, add to render queue. So this will render in not using Media Encoder. And so I can do that, and the render queue opens up down here in a separate tab next to the timeline. Now, this is a little bit cumbersome. I'm going to say I want to put this in a new folder here. Test. And to adjust the settings on this, you have to click on the word lossless right there. And this should be what it gives you by default. If you're on a Mac, I think it'll default to QuickTime up here. Do you know for sure?
I have it on like 8.264, I think.
Yeah, so because that's installed by default on Mac, but it's not installed by default on Windows. Either way, we can say OK in this case, and then in order to output the movie file, we'll hit render here. And you know, in this case, this is not that big, or it's not that complicated, so we'll see it doing its job here. Now, you don't turn this movie in, because this is rendered, but it's not compressed. Let's examine in this case. So here, they also make the After Effects render sound as loud as possible. No matter what you have your volume turned to, it'll be damagingly loud.
They really want you to know that it finished rendering.
I guess. Maybe you can adjust that in preferences. I don't know. I've never looked. I'd have to look.
Stopped at rendering 3 in the morning.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's happened. That's definitely happened to me. Okay, so example export. Yeah, so that movie is 874 megabytes, right? The one we just made. So this, that's half of it. That allows me to actually get a movie out of After Effects. In Media Encoder, just because After Effects couldn't hand it off doesn't mean that Media Encoder like isn't working at all. It's just that this handoff part of it that seems to not work often. And so in here, I can hand off manually by doing this. You can just drag the movie into Media Encoder, right? You could do this with any movie, right? You've got some movie that your uncle shot of something that, you know, is like 700 gigabytes and he wants to post it on YouTube or whatever, but he said it took him like 3 days. You could, recompress his movie here to something reasonable. And so now I can, again, just grab the YouTube settings and put those on here and then encode thusly. And so I'll go ahead and delete that one. And we don't need to look at that right now. But let's put this one next to the other one. That should be good. And I'll export that. There we go. And much better, right? So that took that movie from 874 megabytes to 10 by using the YouTube settings, right? Because that compressed it. So that's how you get around that, right? So when it's working, it's great. Life is great because it renders it out and compresses it. One step, you're done. But you have to be prepared for the fact it doesn't work, and that's how you get around it. You render it out of After Effects, but then just compress it yourself in Media Encoder. Does that make sense for everybody? Cool. You guys, Cassandra, you're hearing all this? Give me a thumbs up on the chat there if you heard this. She said she followed my video. Okay, good. And just to make my point here, right, so here's one. And here's the other one. Which one do you think was the high quality one?
The one that you just played?
Yeah, they're kind of indistinguishable, right? I mean, there are instances where you would do things where you'd be able to tell, but for the most part, the default settings are going to be fine. Okay. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. Now, in addition to this, I'll write it. I'll go back and check the assignments. I'll write it in the assignments. When you guys turn your stuff in on Canvas, I also want you to post it on Slack so that everybody can see everybody else's projects. And then you can all give each other fun emojis, right? Like the fire emoji, the smile emoji, thumbs up emoji, keep it 100 emoji. That's one of my favorite ones. However, let's talk about that. Two things. With Slack, we have limited amount of space, like in the Slack cloud. So we need to make these things even smaller than the ones that you send on Canvas, right? So when you send it to me on Canvas, use the YouTube 1080 settings, right? That'll be high definition and small file size, but good quality. When you post it on Slack, you got to make one that's even tinier, right? Let's do that. And so I'll grab this MP4 and drag it in here. And I'll start with the YouTube 1080 settings. And there's two things we're going to do. We are going to less resolution. So we're going to bring it down from 1920 by 1080. And then we are also going to decrease bit rate. What does that mean? That's just essentially the throughput of the hose, right? Decreasing the amount of data used per second to compress the movie. Both of those things will make a much, much smaller video, right? And this is why are we doing this? We're doing this for when we post all the projects. So when you get home later this week, post this week's thing on Slack so that everybody can thumbs up each other. Let's do this. So again, I drug the one I already made in here. You can use this as a starting point. And under video, first of all, if there's no sound, uncheck audio. That'll decrease the amount of space quite a bit. Okay, so that's one part of it. Second is our size, and we don't want to mess up the aspect ratio. So we want to keep this linked. You don't want to unlink this. So we can go with, this is a pretty good size for Slack, 640 by 360. It's kind of like a super tiny movie. It's enough detail that, you know, most of us are looking at Slack on our phones, and so that'll be plenty big to look at on your phone. When you do this in Media Encoder, at the bottom of Media Encoder, it'll give you the anticipated file size down here. So this is really handy because there's been a handful of things I've submitted to where they're like, yeah, send us your stuff, but you can't send us, you know, send me your reel, but it can't be bigger than 10 megabytes. And it's like, you know, and so you can bring it in here and you can do stuff to the settings and you can see what kind of result it's going to have. So you can get it below the threshold. And so we did the first thing, we got rid of the audio. We did the second thing, we decreased the resolution. Now we scroll down here to bitrate settings. And this is the amount of data used per megabits per second. And we'll just slide this to the left to get underneath our threshold. Okay? So let's say, you know, as a good practice, let's say that everything on Slack needs to be less than 5 megabytes. Sound good? And so we can slide this bit rate down here. And you see that I slid it a little bit, and now it's saying it's going to be 6 megabytes. I can back it off a little bit more. And there we go, 5 megabytes, right? And so now I can say, OK. And then compress this one. Let's do its thing. Let's test the output. Even smaller. It's like 1.5. If we open up that one. This one's definitely a little bit lower. It's making it full screen. Let me say back here. Right? And so here's the Slack version. Here's the YouTube version. And this is essentially the uncompressed version. Does that make sense for everybody? Cool. All right, so like I said, this week, go ahead and post the one that you already did. And let's, even if I don't have it in the instructions, whatever we make that week, post it on Slack so everybody can see each other's work. Sound good? Cool. You guys on the live chat there? Everybody's good? Okay, let's do something that's a little more interesting here before we talk about files, because that was all pretty dry. So I made that like glowing ball, I think, in my example. Is that right for this one? Okay, so there's a couple effects I used there. Some of them are pretty useful, right? So let's see how that works. I'll make a new solid. We'll call this noise pattern. There we go. And I'll grab that same fractal noise. All right, so there we go. I want the one that's under noise and grain, fractal noise. We'll talk about the bit depth of stuff coming up here, but in general, the ones that say 32 are the newer effects. All After Effects has a ton of effects. There's been a ton of effects through history. They've updated a lot of them. All of the legacy ones are in there, which is why there's so much stuff. We can bring that in there. So I've got the fractal noise. Something that does throw people off is that when you open up an effect, then it opens up the effect, controls over here. All of your project stuff is still there. It's just next to it, right? So you can go back and forth between those two windows. If your windows get totally messed up and you're like, I don't know where anything is, you can go back to Window, Workspace, and reset it to standard. And that should get you back to ground truth then. And then you can go from there at that point, right? Because all of this stuff is dockable. You can move all of it around and everything. Cool. So I got some noise here. Let's come up with something a little cooler. Let's try smeary. Yeah, I like that. But I kind of want the opposite. if I want the black to be white and the white to be black, anybody know what effect's going to give me that one? Invert. So let's go ahead and invert this. There we go. So that just, essentially flips all the values there. Cool. I like that one. Now, I want this to move. I want it to be, doing some stuff. We'll talk a lot about noise in more detail, but like I said, up here, this fractal type is going to give you a lot of different flavors of noise. Noise. This is not a movie. This is generated procedurally. There's like a formula that outputs this, and the formula has inputs, and the inputs change how this looks. One of the inputs is time, and that's what this is. So I would write that one down, because I wish they called this parameter time, but really it's called evolution. This is the thing that we wanted. When you want moving noise, so you could use this for a lot of different things. You can use it for fire, you could use it for water in certain instances, those some abstract stuff, which we're going to kind of do here. And you need to have the evolution. If I take the evolution thing and I start twirling it, you see that I get the noise animating. It's a little bit pixelated because it's just sort of updating, but this is what we want to have happen with our keyframes. We want to move this dial. So the values here are not important, like if it's 60 degrees or 70 degrees. What's important is the amount of change in the values, right? This is sort of the amount of change over time. Anytime you have rotational stuff in After Effects, it's the total number of turns plus degrees, right? So this 360 is the same as 1, right? So this would be 1 whole turn, or if I just made this 360, that's the same. So anyways, here I'm going to set a keyframe for evolution. I'm going to come to the end of this, and let's say 3 turns around the circle. And so now, remember, when I want to keyframe something, I have to turn on the stopwatch, right? Everybody's with me there. And once you turn the stopwatch on, do not turn it off, because that erases your keyframes, right? The stopwatch is like a light switch. It's the light switch that says yes animation, and then you leave it on, because then at that point it keeps the value. And so, cool. Now I've got some like abstract energy stuff. That's good. Great. Now I want to turn it into like an energy ball. Let's do that. And there's a fun. You could certainly do this type of thing in Cinema 4D, but we actually can do it without having to leave After Effects. There's a cool effect called CC Sphere. So this takes a image and wraps it around a 3D sphere. So I'm going to, again, with the same, I only have 1 layer so far. I did the noise, I did the invert, and now I'll select CC Sphere. And I get this. You see, it's taken my thing and wrapped it around a sphere. This is designed for making like planets out of the box. And so you see that part of it is dark, like it's in space. If I hit play, you see it's still animating, but now it's wrapped around a sphere. Let's adjust some of this. Under shading here, I think it's under ambient. If I turn that up, if I turn up ambient, it just sort of fills it in as if it were not shaded. Cool. And you have a radius, so I can make it a bigger glowing ball of some kind. Cool. So this is, I'm doing a bunch of stuff. I'm running this live stream. The computer, this is taking a while for the green to fill up. I'm sure you guys ran into this some while you were working, right? Where at first, if you're not doing too much, if you hit play, it seems like it's real time, right? The green is, pre-rendering to your RAM in your computer. And the first time you hit play in After Effects after you change something, see how all the green went away? Because it hasn't drawn those frames yet. And so I'll hit play, and it's going slower than real time. How much slower? Let's see here. I'm going to throw a blur on it as well, just to make it even slower. Up here, let's see if I can, there we go. Up here under info, this will be telling you if you're playing back in real time or not, right? And so usually once you start stacking some stuff on top of each other, you'll see that it'll say something in red up here. If it says it in red, that means you're not quite in real time, and you got to let it go through the whole cycle. Then once it all fills in green, then this should not be red up here, and you should see that it's playing back in real time. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. In this instance, with this comp, you see that I hit play, and the whole comp eventually fills up green. However, if you have a longer comp, you only get as much green as you have RAM in the computer. So if your comp is like 1.5 minutes, and you hit the play bar, it's not going to pre-render the whole thing, right? You're only going to get as much as there is RAM in the computer, which is why when you start working with longer stuff, you want to use the B and N shortcuts. You want to have these in your notes. B is the beginning of the work area. N is the end of the work area. And the work area is essentially your preview zone, right? So if I move the playhead over here and I press B, there's the beginning. You can see it right there. If I move the play over here and press N, there it is. And so now if I hit play, it should just play between those two spots. So it allows you to zoom in time just to focus on a tiny part. For smaller, shorter comps, this isn't as big of a deal. For something that's much longer, it's a very big deal, right? Because you don't want to wait for it to pre-render all this other junk until you get to the part that you're actually working on. You just want to set it to that part that you're working on. Does that make sense for everybody? So you can use the B and the N keys, or you can come in here and just grab the end of this, and you can manually slide it back and forth if you need to.
You can also hold shift, and it does every other key. It does every other keyframe.
If you hold shift while you're playing, or
Yeah. Hold shift while it's rendering. It's all rendered right now, though.
oh, okay. So every other.
Yeah,
Okay.
it goes faster.
The other thing is this menu right here. So full means that it's going to try and show you every pixel. If it's going really slow, you can back this off to half or a third or a quarter, and then it'll render every fourth pixel or every third pixel, and then you'll have less, it should preview faster. There's ways to work faster. That's a good one. So play, hold down shift, every other camera. Cool. Okay, let me delete these blurs for now. Cool. So again, here's a stack of effects. What did I use? I used Fractal Noise, Invert, CC Sphere. Again, I didn't want you to figure this out this week. That whole thing where he shows you one of the noises, I just wanted you to do something with some effects, right? Whatever it is. Let's use some of the Red Giant stuff, right? And so all of the Red Giant effects, once you have them installed, they say RG here. You should see them all there. And so the one that we've been having trouble with is this one, everything that says universe. For some people it's been throwing up this error, and if it is, just uninstall the universe. I'm not having the problem right now because I think this is the old version of universe in an older version of After Effects. So, anyways, the ones we're most interested in that we're going to use the most are down here under RGVFX. There's a bunch of nice stuff here. There's also a really nice glow. Let's see. I guess that is, oh yeah, we'll do the optical glow under RGVFX. And so with this selected, I'll press that one. Let's see. Cool. Let's go ahead and let's colorize the glow a little bit. And so glow, right, there's a lot of different flavors of glow. There's a couple different After Effects built-in glows. The Red Giant stuff has a bunch of glow. But the basic glow formula is two things. It's a blur, right? So you're blurring stuff. And then it's using the add blend mode. So you can make your own glow just by doing those two things. For example, if I were to go back and find the Gaussian blur, so this is another thing to write down. You just want a regular blur, just blurring stuff. That is going to be your Gaussian blur. And like I said, there's two different versions of this. In general, don't use the stuff that says legacy. That's just there because they got to keep the old versions in there. So if I put in, I'm going to duplicate the layer. And then on the one on top, I'm going to add a Gaussian blur. I'm going to get rid of the optical glow thing for now, just to do the simple glow. All right, so here's the Gaussian blur, kind of like so. And then this layer that's on top, I'm going to change from normal to add. And the sort of glowiness of it is a function of how much you're blurring the layer that's on top and the opacity of the layer that's being added, right? So just by dialing in the opacity, I can sort of manually change the amount of glow, right? So that gives me glow, super simple, right? That's the basic glow formula, is you blur stuff, then you add it back on top. However, you can do a bunch of other stuff to make it more interesting, right? Which is why there's all these other glow effects. You could, add a glow, tint it, then add it back in. You could try other additive blend modes, right? Blend modes, let's just talk about those for a second. When you go to your blend modes here, they're in sections. So all of these will darken layer below with layer above. All of these will brighten layer below with layer above. Those are the two most important sections, right? And you can think, looking at those two sections there, that's the most important distinction between those two sections. As far as the difference between the individual ones within those sections, it's kind of like flavors, right? So if I were to, let's step back to that glow, right? So here's add, here's lighten, here's screen, here's color dodge, here's classic dodge, linear color, right? They're all brightening the one below with the one above, but with slightly different algorithms, right? As far as the way things get added together. But, and to be honest, like I know, most of the time I know I want to be in this zone or I want to be in this zone, but then I just sort of like, how about this one? How about this one? Oh, that looks good. I'll go with that one, right? It's not like I can tell or pre-visualize how lighten is going to look different than add or whatever. Like it's just sort of, but knowing which section is which is important in that case. Cool? Right, so here, optical glow, see, gives us a bunch of stuff, right? So most glows are going to have some sort of amount, which is that transparency we talked about, and they're going to have some sort of size, right? As far as that's the amount of blurring that's happening. And so if I were to make that bigger, you see that the glow reaches out further because you're blurring, you know, that layer more. And the amount is going to be like that brightness there on this. I'm going to make the inner tint something lighter. There we go, I like that a little bit better. And so now this will sort of layer together. And I have some sort of like energy ball thing. Let's animate it. We're going to make it ease in. Remember how we did the ease text on Wednesday? All right. So Corey, what's the first step?
So you make
I want it to drop down from the top.
oh, you make a keyframe first.
What do I need to keyframe?
The beginning.
What parameter do I need to keyframe?
Position.
That's right. What's the shortcut for position?
P.
That's right. P gives me a position. This would be an instance where I want it to end up here. And so animate backwards. I'm going to move the playhead forward and set a keyframe. Turn this on. And then I'll back it up to the beginning and move it off stage. Right. And so now I get that. And then, Darren, what's next? I want it to drop off. To animate down. Take a guess.
Oh, it's really.
Wait, it's Darren? No, not Darren.
I'm Jared.
Jared and Jordan. I took both your names, shoved them together, and then put a D on front. I can't believe you didn't know what I was thinking. Jordan, what do you do next? Come on, Darren. Jordan. So how do I make it animate down?
What?
I want it to animate down off the screen.
Oh, just move it down. Don't make it go forward. Move it down.
So here I could, if I move it down, it's going to set what here? It's going to make a... That's right. Okay, so I'll move it down. So let me play it. I want it to stay put in the middle before it moves down. So Jared, what do I have to do?
Just copy the middle keyframe.
That's right. This one here, I need to have it over there too, right? So I can grab this one and Control C, and it's like using a word processor. It's going to Control V wherever the playhead is. Right, so I'll move the playhead to kind of like right here and press Control V, and I'll paste it. That's good. We got the motion we want, except the quality of the motion is terrible. Why is it terrible, Vanna?
Because it's linear.
Yes. Yeah, we got to ease this, right? So if we look at we can see that these are all straight lines. In general, we do not want that in this graph. easiest way here is using this Keyframe Velocity, right? So I'll grab all of these, right click, and go to Keyframe Velocity. Right, so the number I've been using is, 80. It's going to give you some pretty nice easing. So I'll go into 80, tab, 80, okay? And so now, that's good. With the easing, it's probably a little too quick. And so I like the quality of the emotion, but the whole thing is too fast. So here's another good shortcut and tip is Alt drag. Right, if you select all of the keyframes and then Alt drag the very last one, on a Mac it's Option drag, I think. Watch what happens. I'm going to grab this one here. I already did this. I selected all of them. And then I'm going to Alt drag this one. It allows me to compress or expand them. See how they keep their relative relationship? But you can expand them out. And so now the same proportions will be there, but the animation will be slower. This works in both directions. You can compress something that's too long, or you can expand something that's too fast. Let's add a little bit of rotation. In that CC sphere, there's actually a rotation parameter. And so this, I told you never use any linear keyframes. I lied. For rotation of things, like planets, you generally want that to be consistent and not speeding up and slowing down, right? The Earth doesn't rotate like this, right? It's slow and consistent, right? And so in this case, under CC sphere, there is a rotation. I think we want the rotation Y. Let's see. Nope, not that one. Yeah, that one. So I'll come over here and I'll set a keyframe there. And then at the end, I'll set a keyframe for 360. And so now, there we go, I get that. It's rotating three-dimensionally. So CC sphere really only works for spheres, right? Which is surprisingly useful in a lot of instances. But to do more complex 3D shapes, you have to do other things, right? But this is a useful thing for this type of stuff. Cool. So that gives me like that energy ball-ish kind of look thing. Any questions from you guys on the live chat? You've been a little quiet. Let's save this and talk about saving. First of all, don't keep anything named comp1. So let's call this energy ball. There we go. And let's bring something else into this. I want to use an image, not the particle thing for right now. Let's say. Cool. All right, so let's bring this image in and put it down here below this. And scale this up a bit. I'm gonna put this back on full. There we go. Cool. All right, so there we go. This is not cut out right now. We want to put this over top of this layer below. There's a couple different ways to do this, but in this case, we want to keep the bright stuff but not the dark stuff, right? So we can actually do this with a blend mode. Which blend mode do I want? This category or this category? If we want to reveal, essentially get rid of the black and reveal the stuff below it. So we want to brighten the layer below with the layer above.
The lower one.
Yeah, the add, right? And so if I switch this to add, there we go. Right, so in some instances where you need to get rid of, the black, you can do that there. So this, this come in and move down. Cool. All right, and now we have this external file in here. So let's talk about saving. A few things. The AEP file, right, which is your After Effects project, does not contain any assets. It's just a file. It essentially has all of your keyframes in it, in the settings, that type of thing, but it doesn't have any of the external assets. And we're going to be using external assets in virtually every project, right? What kind of stuff can we bring into After Effects? Pictures, movies, sounds, all that stuff. Vectors. All of these types of things are stored separately. How do when I save, if I go to Save As, I'll call this, let's get some free space on this data drive, make a new folder, call this star test. There we go. And double click that one, call this star test. There we go. And we'll save. And I saved, and if we look at the folder here, star test, not start test. Anyways, it's saved, but it just has the AEP problem. This is not good, okay? Because we have external assets, and they're not here with the After Effects project. What is better? What's better is coming in here and going to Dependencies, Collect Files. I'm going to do this. I don't need to mess with this box. I'll say Collect. And we'll put them, I'll put it into another folder here separately so we can see the difference. Star test assets. We'll say with assets so it's clear. We'll get rid of the T on the end of star this time. Boom, there we go. Inside here, and yeah. Cool. Now let's go see what happened. Now I get the After Effects project and this folder. This is super important. The footage folder. All the stuff that you bring into After Effects needs to stay in the footage folder. Everybody with me there? Because now if I double click the footage folder hey, there's that star field picture. Right now it's all together in the same place. Let me show you why this is important. So let's save that. I will close this project and come back here, open this one. I'll hopefully not crash the computer. Let's see here. I'm just deleting this from my downloads to make a point. Here we go. So now come over here. Cool. This is the problem. Now I get this. One file is missing since you saved this project because that After Effects project was saved and not collected, right? And when I say, okay, I get this. This will happen to all of you, right? When After Effects can't find a asset, it shows you this instead, color bars, right? How do you fix this? You can fix this by right-clicking and saying replace footage file and then navigating to wherever that file is. That will tell After Effects where it is. Let me pull it out of the trash so I don't think I could link it in the trash. Right, so now I could fix this by coming in here, right click, replace footage file, and now I just threw it onto the desktop. And it restored it. And if I had animated that star field in the background, the keyframes would still be there, all that other stuff would still be there, right? And I've now relinked it. However, I still haven't moved the star field file. It's still just sitting on the desktop. It doesn't exist in the footage folder. And so when you're originally putting a project together like this, you guys didn't have this project problem. You shouldn't have had this problem this week because everything was already all together, right? All the stuff was in the footage folder, in the correct folder. But as you start to build things yourself, you're gonna make a new thing, start dragging stuff in there, right? And that stuff is probably somewhere on your computer. And once you get to the point where you have most of your stuff in there, that's where you want to do dependencies collect files, so that you grab everything and then copy and save it all in the correct hierarchy so that everything is together, and then later you can go back and all the stuff will be there and you won't get the color bars when you reopen the project. Does that make sense for everybody? Right? Understanding this concept is critical. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of a drag trying to do this all the time. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. So, data stewardship. Number 1, collect files, so that you keep everything in which folder? Footage. Right? That's where everything's got to go. The second thing we're going to do is versioning. The other name for this is increment and save. We want to do this so that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket. So that we don't, if a file gets corrupted, you don't lose all of your work. You may use some of your work, but not all of it. The third thing we're going to do is back up on Google Drive, right? Everybody has a Google Drive account associated with their Maricopa account. If you have some other cloud-based storage that you want to use, that's fine. Like if you're on Dropbox or some other one, that's fine. The thing about your Maricopa Google Drive is that you have unlimited space there. You can throw as much junk up there as you want. So we talked about number 1. Let's talk about number 2, versioning. Okay. How do you ensure yourself against file corruption? Because it does happen. It happens every semester to somebody. Their file gets corrupted. And the first thing I say is like, well, that's not terrible because you've been incrementing. Sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. So up here, increment and save. And so I am going to do that. I'll go to File, Increment and Save. And let's look what happened. I get this, Start Test 2. And if I look, that's the version I'm working on. So essentially, I do this. When do I do this? I don't do this every time. I hit Control S just out of sort of muscle memory at this point, just making sure I'm saving it. But at the end of a work session, right? So if I'm sitting down to do something, if I'm lucky, I can carve out 2 hours to focus on something. And at the end of that, I'll say, okay, I'm going to increment and save. And that'll make a new version, right? Keeping the old version. And they just count up. So every time I do this, it'll make another one. So I'll say increment and save again. And here it is, Start Test 3. Everybody with me there? So how does this help? This helps in that if you come back and this file is corrupted, right? Meaning that you go to open it and After Effects is like, I can't open this file. It's something wrong with it. Because there's not a whole lot you can do to fix those problems. There's some, you can immediately jump on YouTube and see what other black magic people have done to try and recover their files. But it doesn't look good often. Most of the time, this file may be corrupted, but this one is okay, right? Something happened in between here and here that messed up your file somehow. And so if you're versioning, you do lose the work that happened between here and here. But at least you get to step back to here and redo that part versus like starting from scratch, because all of your saving has been on one file. Does this make sense for everybody?
Would autosave, like the autosave folder, do kind of the same thing?
It does do the same thing. If you go, you got to turn that on. So under File, Preferences, I forget which one. Is it under General? You can't turn this on. If you turn it on in school computers, it'll just turn off when you log out. But at home, if you turn on autosave, yeah, it'll save 5 versions every 20 minutes. And the only thing that happens here is that I don't believe it does it if you haven't done the first save. And so, because it wouldn't know where to put them. Or it might, but I'm not sure where they go. I'd have to look. Anyways, this will be keeping those versions as well there. So I would have this turned on and the other thing turned on so you can track your progress. So having multiple versions of the same. Because the AEP file, this isn't you know how we just collected files so that we have the picture and the AEP file? When you do this, you're not copying all the stuff again. You're just making another copy of the AEP file. Because most of the time, it's not like your movie gets corrupted or your picture gets corrupted. It's the AEP file that gets corrupted. And so, and the AEP file, even for a big project, is very small. It's like literally a list of numbers and keyframes and stuff like that. It's not, maybe it's a couple megabytes. It's not like a piece of footage that's going to be like 1.5 gigs or something like that. Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. Third thing for our data stewardship is that we back stuff up. So if you're using your Maricopa account, and this is easier than ever. At school, if you're on one of the lab computers, you can't install Google Drive because these are multi-use computers and that wouldn't work. But you can log into your drive on Chrome. And now you don't even need to zip anything up. You can actually drag a whole folder into Google Drive to back it up. And so, yeah, let's go here, here. Here we go, star test with assets. I can drag this in here. And it uploads the folder and all the stuff. So there's the folder, there's the AEP file, there's the footage folder, and there's the picture.
And I'm assuming that all goes away after we graduate, right? Would it all just delete?
No one, I don't have a solid answer on that. I don't know anyone who is not able to access their Maricopa email.
I have access to my old high school one.
You still?
Yeah.
Yeah. The people who would do that, you know, like, let me get on top of eliminating everybody who graduated, like, nobody's doing that.
So I don't have to worry about, like, losing things?
Not in any sort of, like, reasonable time. If I had to bet on district IT getting their act together and really cleaning up the district student Google Drive space, I would not bet on it. Okay? So there's just, I mean, first of all, like, this is all through Google. I mean, I don't even know what they do. Like, I am sure whatever happens when you graduate, plus it's community college, right? So, like, people, you know, I have students who've been going here for decades, you know, like, because they don't want to graduate, they're just going, taking classes. So, yeah, I wouldn't stress about that at all. That'll all be there for a while. On your home computers, you can download the app called Google, I think it's Backup and Sync is what they call Google Drive now. And you can install this on your machine. And this will make a folder called Google Drive. And then anything you just put in that folder, as long as you're connected to the internet, will back up. So you don't, that step where I like logged in and then dragged the thing over, you don't even need to do that. You can be even lazier. You just need to put it in that folder, and as long as your computer is connected to the internet, it'll sync that. As long as you don't turn off syncing. Syncing is on by default. Like I said, you can't do that on school computers for obvious reasons, but when I say school computers, I mean the lab computers. If you got one of the checkout computers from the school, you can install stuff there. So you could use this there in that instance. Does that make sense for everybody? Right? And so if you follow those three things, you know, collecting your files to keep things together, versioning your files, and then making sure that it's in at least two places, right? If it's on your drive and then also in the cloud, that's reasonable, right? If your computer explodes, that's bad. Hopefully you're not terribly burned, but then your data is still safe on Google Drive. So once you recover, you could log into Google Drive and finish your project, right? The instance in which you know both of those things get destroyed, you know, how would that happen? We're talking some sort of like meteor level extinction event at that time. In which case, you're probably not worried about your After Effects projects. Sound good? Okay, so that's a little dry. I know talking about data stewardship is not like, wow, it's pretty exciting. But, you know, these files definitely get corrupted. I see it every semester. C4D is definitely a little dicier than After Effects. I see more corrupted C4D files, but it definitely happens. Cool. How are you guys doing on the live stream? Everybody doing good? couple of people said they just re-rendered their project. What time is it? 8:41. Okay, I need to take a break from speaking for a second. So why doesn't everybody open up your homework or download your homework file and make a Slack version and then post it on Slack. And then give at least 2 other people some encouraging emojis. Only encouraging emojis, no weirdness. That's our Slack formula. Jared and Jordan. No Daryl. Or Darren. Answer me, Darren. After you make a Slack version, let's practice our data stewardship. So do a copy of it by collecting files to a new location. Make sure you do an increment and save. And once you're done with that, for good measure, back it up to your Google Drive. How's it going? Everybody able to get their data under wraps? Corey, is that one of the school laptops?
Yeah.
Awesome. Is it working?
Yeah, it's working. I just didn't know which one was the laptop we're supposed to use. So I was just giving one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, those are nice. They should work out pretty well, I hope.
It's working out so far.
Good. All right, cool. Let's, I'll talk a little bit more here and then we'll try out two things. Let's get back to making stuff. Okay, so on last Wednesday, we sort of started the conversation about setting keyframes. Everybody feels like they have a handle on that. Turn stopwatch on under almost all circumstances. Make sure that we're easing, right? Let's talk about some more pixel-based things here. A lot of the work we're going to do, we have to be able to select part of an image. When we're doing this, there's two primary techniques for doing this kind of thing in After Effects. One is using a mask, and the second one will be using a track matte. of some kind. So these would be the two main techniques. Let's look at the basics of both here. There's a lot of overlap. Like you could, especially with simple situations, you could certainly do them one way or the other. But there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One, a mask moves with the layer, right? So a mask is not its own layer. It's something that you put on a layer. You know, like we put an effect on a layer, it's part of that layer. And usually you're drawing this with shapes. A track mat is when you cut out one layer with another. And so a track mat requires two separate layers, and as such they can move or do anything. We'll just say layers are independent. There's more to it than that, but this is the top level idea, right? And both of these are going to give us, we have a bunch of something, and we need to narrow it down. We don't want all of this, we just want part of it. So let's look at this. I'm going to make a new comp. Make sure it fits all my requirements. 6 seconds. We'll call this mask example. There we go. And I'll drag in a picture. It's pretty big. I'll scale it down a little bit. Cool. All right, so creating a mask. Like I said, a mask is a shape that we're using to cut this out. So the part of what makes After Effects a little bit awkward, especially at the beginning, is that it's very context sensitive. So some of the tools operate differently depending on the state of the program. Most often they do things differently depending on what you have selected. So if I have this layer selected and I want to just grab one of these buildings here, right? And even, I'm not, just doing it very roughly. Any shape will make a mask. So you can create shapes two ways. One is using the shape primitive tool. And if you click and hold down, you get the other sort of standard shapes, rectangles, circles. Really, that's all I ever use. And so if I have a square here and this is selected, if I click and drag, it makes a mask. So now I've revealed part of the layer and hid the rest of it. If I want to adjust that building, you could do that, right? But the mask is down here underneath the layer. And so anything I do to the layer happens to the mask. This is all together. The other way you could draw a mask is with the layer selected, grab the pen tool, and this allows you to click and drag to create a mask that way. Something that happens often at the beginning is that if this layer was not selected and I went in here to draw, you see it does not make a mask, it makes a shape. This is confusing for people at the beginning, all right? So why did it perform one way one time and differently the other way? Is because before I had this layer selected when I drew the thing. So if you have a layer selected and you draw something, some kind of shape, it's going to draw a mask by default. If you don't have anything selected, it's going to draw a separate shape layer by default, right? Now I get an entirely new layer, whereas before everything was happening just to this layer, is making a mask on that layer. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay, that's a big one that throws people off at the beginning. Like, why is this tool doing this? Cool, so let's grab that. The mask, like I said, moves with whatever it is I have selected. And if you unfurl down here, you can see a bunch of the mask parameters. Is the live stream still going, guys? Let me know over there. Another good shortcut is tilde. The tilde key is that squiggly line. Can I type it? Yeah, that one. In the far upper left. Tilde makes, goes full screen on the panel. The mouse is over. So for instance, if I move my mouse over the main window here, I press tilde, everything goes away except for that. If I come down here to the timeline, there we go. So especially on laptops where you have limited real estate, right? Then this becomes really handy. Especially on the timeline, in After Effects, you can get to almost anything if you keep drilling down over here and unfurl things, but it's usually not the best way because then you end up taking a lot of space here. But if you use this, you can see more things on the timeline. It's a little bit easier to navigate what's going on. Tilde is a good key there. So the mask parameters here, you can edit the actual shape of the mask. So you can come in and move the mask path. And this is one of the things that is keyframeable. This is a little strange out of the box, is that we've keyframed some things like position, right? Or scale or opacity. You keyframed all of those as part of the homework. That's like a single parameter or maybe two parameters together. The mask path, like how many numbers is the mask path? Well, it depends on the mask you drew, right? If you use the pen tool, there could be a whole bunch of points in there. But all of those points are represented by just this, which is a little strange out of the box. So if I keyframe this, and I move the playhead, come back up here, and I move this, I get another keyframe. But if I look at this keyframe, you see that it doesn't, I mouse over it, it just gives me a time value. It doesn't tell me what the value of the mask is, because it's like an array. It's like multiple points with lots of numbers, but they're all stored in this value. And so now you see that the shape itself actually changes in the timeline there, right? So I could grab this. If I wanted to shorten this mask, I could grab those 2 points and move this. When I'm editing a mask or any shape, I have the mask path selected, and then I don't click on the square. I drag over the square and drag it. If you click on the square, you can get into this mode, which then is always irritating. I think it's much easier to just select the square and move it. This goes for editing shapes and editing masks, because masks are essentially shapes. They're just in that other zone, right? And so now I'm able to animate the mask path over time if I were to need to. The feathering, blurs the edge of the mask, right? So you could make it a softer or very clean. And then mask opacity sort of fades it in and out. And then expansion allows you to grow or shrink the mask. So it sort of grows it or shrinks it out from the edge that you have there. Does that make sense? And all of this is part of that layer. You can have multiple masks on the same layer, right? So I could come over here and mask out some other thing. When you have multiple masks, then they can each have their own blend mode. This can get a little crazy making, but usually they're just separate. So if you're in add, it sort of gives you that. If you wanted all of the other stuff, you could invert it. Right, now you're cutting out that part, but leaving the rest of it.
Is there a shortcut to get to mask path?
I don't know if there is. Let's look. So I press Q. I think that's just switching to the shape layer tool. As far as like automatically unfurling and selecting there, I don't think so. I'll look again, but not as far as I'm aware. Make sense? Okay, so like I said, this is for pretty simple selecting of things, right? If you find yourself, grabbing the pen tool and getting in there and making hundreds of points, like you're probably doing it wrong. That's not really how that tool works. There's probably some other route to that selection. And let's look at one of those options. So let's go to composition, new composition. We'll call this track matte example. Okay, there we go. And let's bring in this thing. There we go. Turn off the sound on that. Cool. So I've got this piece of footage. And again, I'm going to select part of it. I'm going to do it with a separate layer. It could be any layer, but let's make some type. And let's go this out a bunch. There we go. And I want to cut out the movie based on the letters. So essentially fill in the letters with the movie. This is a good job for a track matte. So track matte, like I said, is used two layers, so it's a little bit different. It's right next to mode here. You see T and track matte. However, if you don't see this, you can right click columns and you can turn some of these things on and off here, right? So if you right click and say columns, modes, you see that those go away, which gives you a little more room over here, which happens sometimes. If you right click columns, modes, it turns all that back on. So on the layer below, under track matte, I am going to select Alpha Matte California. And it cuts out the video with the type. Let's go ahead and animate the type just to make this look cooler. So I'll say position, and I'll make it scroll across the screen. We're essentially reproducing the opening credits for the OC here at this point. Does anybody watch that show? Yeah, I guess it was on decades ago at this point. So So you see how doing this with a mask would be not possible, right? Also notice how the top layer does not, you can't select a track matte for the top layer because there's nothing above it, right? Whatever the top layer is in your comp, there's not going to be a track matte option there because it's whatever is directly above that layer. It's cutting that out. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. That's the basic gist. Usually, also when I'm using a track matte is, like I said, this layer relationship is important. And so a lot of times, once you set up this relationship, you go ahead and you pre-compose both of those so that then they're sort of together in their own layer. So I'm going to right click and say pre-compose, and we'll call this California matte. And so there it has that one layer. If I want to get into this, I can double click, and now I'm back to here where I can make changes. Make sense so far? Okay, let's dive a little bit deeper into the track matte situation. When you do select alpha matte here, notice that it turns the layer above it off, like it's not visible here. And so it's being used to cut this out. And then also, I only gave you part of the story. There's actually two different types of track mattes. You have an alpha matte, and then you have a luma matte. And so an alpha matte is going to cut out based on alpha. And luma matte, cut out on brightness. Luminance. Let's do that. So I'm going to make a slightly different. So I'm going to move this up here. And let's undo this for a second. Turn that back on. There we go. And then let's draw another shape of some kind, something like this. There we go. It's its own shape layer. And let's move it down. And I'll darken this up so it's there, but dark. Cool. Okay, and then I want to cut this out here on both of these, right? So I want California to cut it out, and I want this hexagon here to cut it out, right? But I can't set this to use both layers. Any ideas how to get around this? Yeah, exactly. We're going to pre-compose both of these and then use that as the track matte. So we'll grab both of these, we'll pre-compose, and we'll call this there we go. And now I can go in and we'll be able to see the difference here. So if I say alpha matte, okay, that kind of does what we thought it would before, right? Where we cut out both things based on this. If I come in, I get a luma matte, I get this, right? Where now California looks the same, the type, because it's bright white. But the hexagon does not because it's dark gray, almost black, right? And now it's cutting it out based on luminance, right? And so this does allow you to fade in the edges of something. Anything I would do to this layer would also affect the way that the track matte works. So for instance, if I came in here and blurred the matte layer, you see it affects the way it cuts everything out there, right? So this is essentially the same thing as like feathering the mask layer. It puts those things together like that. So the difference between the luma matte and the alpha matte. Making sense? Okay. Let's get rid of this. This allows us to look at a version of this here. Let's come back and I'm going to go into just this comp. And the alpha information is important to understand that, right? The alpha is a channel. So in After Effects, we're going to have 4 channels by default. Red, G, V, red, green, blue, and A, alpha channel. Actually, let's look at this first. I'm going to turn this off and this. The way you can look at the channels individually is right here. So this allows you, by default, we're looking at, all of them together like you would expect. But I can come over here and look at each one individually. So for instance, if I go to red, it's not red. This is showing me the brightness of the red pixels, right? So anything that's white is going to be bright in any channel, but the things that are most red would be most bright here. Let's look. What's red? The bridge, obviously. Yeah, of course. And so if I go to red, the bridge is pretty bright, right? The green is showing me the brightness of the green pixels, right? So now the bridge is dark, but the plants and stuff are a little bit brighter, right? Because this is the brightness of the green channel. Is that grass in the foreground? No, not really. Blue, right? This is the brightness of the blue channel. The sky, very bright. Not much blue in the Golden Gate Bridge. The alpha channel, nothing is cut out on this, right? No part of this image is see-through. And so this is solid, 100%. If I were to turn everything back on here, now if I go and look at the alpha channel, this is what is currently solid and what is see-through, right? So black is transparent, white is opaque. So if I were to come back and composite anything behind this on my layers, if I come back and put this at RGB, let's come back over here. Right, that shows up behind because that's behind everything. Now if I were to look at the alpha channel, it's now totally filled in, right? Because nothing in that lowest layer is see-through. It's all solid. Is this making sense? Okay. Most of the time, well, I mean, I would say like 60-70% of the time I'm using the alpha matte. The inverted ones just, flip it if you wanted the opposite thing. So if you went to alpha matte inverted, they're just giving you the opposite part of it. Make sense? Okay. Give these two things a shot, just as a test, right? With whatever footage or stuff you got laying around on the computer there, just bring in something and make a mask, play around with that a little bit, and then put 2 layers together in a separate comp to make a track matte of some kind. These are 2 concepts you definitely need to grasp. I start at 9 in the morning, so it's a long day.
Yeah. I was thinking about that when I got here. It's like all the lights are off.
Yeah, the campus at night, I mean, even in the before times, it was pretty desolate, but now there's just like nobody. From what I understand, only 50% of the classes are back in person right now. So the enrollment overall is down way less, like it's 90, or something. But you guys at home can play along as well. Go ahead and make a mat, make a track mat. Make a mask. Jordan, are you able to get in there, or is it?
Just take a turn.
You got all your course stuff straightened out?
Yeah, I was so worried because we tried to figure it out on Friday, and they were like, the last day to enroll for classes is Friday. Like, I think that's what it was, and then I got off work at 4, and that's when they all kind of like stopped working, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I like emailed them over the weekend, and then it was kind of funny because I emailed a few different people, and everybody replied this morning, so I got like tons of help in the morning. And yeah, Michelle just like hadn't started a class yet, so nobody could find it on Find a Class.
Oh, okay.
So she's starting it this week. But I thought it was just full, so I couldn't get into it. So.
Okay. Which class is that? The internship?
Because I was in the internship class that was like, it provided client work, and we had to like do it in the class. But then I have the internship, so I didn't want to do both.
So what are you doing at work right now?
I work at, it's called Anchor Productions. So I just edit videos all day.
What kind of videos do they make?
We do a lot of like doctor testimonials, and they usually like let me do all the animating stuff. So I do like the logo for the hospital. We do Abrazo hospital stuff, and then I'll do like the intros and outros, or if there's like any graphics, I do it. But if there's none, then I just edit in Premiere. I like it.
These are people saying that the doctor was good?
Yeah, it's like the doctors talking, kind of like they talk about themselves in one video, and then there's like 5 others where it's like they're talking about the surgery that they do all the time. So if you needed to get surgery, you could like watch those and choose your doctor kind of. So we do a lot of those, or like did Sun State Equipment Rental, and then I don't know, just some companies that I've never heard of. Like my boss will fly to Texas and shoot videos, and then we edit them. So.
So do you guys live close to school?
I kind of do.
Where
I
do you-
go to here and north as well.
Oh, okay.
I live 20 minutes away from here.
Where's that?
Glendale.
Okay.
I live more near the other one, the north one.
Oh, up there.
Yeah. Far.
I live like in between those distances. 15 minutes to here, 15 minutes to north. And I have to go from here to north for in between classes.
What class are you taking up there?
Into the cinema.
That's up there?
Yeah. I didn't know that.
Who's teaching that?
It's Leanne and someone.
We live like 2 minutes away.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Close.
Jordan, you close? To here?
It's like 15 minutes.
Oh, okay. That's not bad.
Oh, Genie Bird.
Yeah, G, yeah.
Yeah.
So Jordan, do you know where the footage is that you're missing?
What's on my house? I use another account.
Okay, all right. So, but you understand why you're missing it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to find some.
So Jared, is your computer making the Mario sounds?
What do you mean?
I thought some computer made the coin sound earlier.
That was mine.
That was yours? Oh.
That was
It made a sticky noise.
I thought I was being Sherlock Holmes over here. Like, wonder whose Mario computer.
There's a difference between the coin sound and the sticky key sound. I don't know what you heard.
Are you guys able to track mat and mask something? Track mat.
I'm trying to figure out how to like switch the layers between text.
Like put one on top of the other?
Yeah, like switch the
Just click and drag it up.
Oh,
Yeah.
I tried doing dragging below. That
Yeah.
didn't work. Thank you.
Also, on your laptop, like a mouse is a pretty good idea. Running these programs on a trackpad is going to hurt your brain and your hand. Like, especially when we get to Cinema 4D, like trying to zoom in on stuff and everything is just it's a nightmare on a trackpad. So you don't need a fancy mouse, just something you can plug in. All right, online live people. I think we're going to call it. We masked things. We track matted. We conquered. I'd say we're done here. Cool. So we'll pick this up on Wednesday, right? And if you want to get started early on this week's thing, everything's up there right now. Yeah, good. Everybody understanding the format? This working for everybody? Cool. Seems to work for all of our online friends so far. Everybody's getting the idea.